I have a halo. Ready? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. And you are not concerned with anyone's opinion, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord. There. So this week's Gospel, if you read the long form, which we did here at St. Joe's, of the Gospel this Sunday, the part that includes the person getting thrown out for wearing the non-appropriate dress, the non-wedding garment, this is the next thing. So he's on the Temple Mount. Jesus is on the Temple Mount, as you recall, and he's been speaking with the chief priests and the elders. And now today, a different opponent comes up. Not necessarily a completely different opponent, because the Pharisees and the Herodians could be chief priests and among the chief priests and elders. They could belong to that party. Not likely the chief priests. The chief priests were mostly Sadducees. But it would make sense if some of the Sadducees might be Herodians, since they like to get along with the Roman government. And so it would make sense that they might have some leanings in that direction. So the Pharisees want to trap Jesus. And the Pharisees are the ones who are religiously persnickety, right? They have the laws all figured out, so they have 600 and so laws, if you follow each of them. And so they're concerned about living the faith well. And so the way that they ask the question is the sort of way that the Pharisees would ask such a question. It would be a concern to them. If I pay the temple tax, am I doing something which is against God's law? Not the temple tax, but the Roman tax, the census tax. Am I doing something that is against God's law? Now, saying that it's the sort of question that the Pharisees might legitimately ask is not the same as saying that the Pharisees are legitimately asking the question. And Jesus sees right through this, right? St. Matthew tells us, of course, right off, the Pharisees wanted to trip him up in speech, right? They want to make him look bad. He's on the Temple Mount. He's in the area where people are teaching. And so he's in an area where there's debate, there's often vigorous debate in schools, right? And the religious schools of ancient Israel were no exception. In fact, they're probably some of the best examples of the way that one can pursue things and have debates about things and question things and look at things from a lot of different angles. But in this case, the Pharisees, being religious, are opposed to rule by Gentiles. The Herodians, actually one commentator says that the Herodians weren't a real party. Like the Pharisees and the Sadducees were a block. They were a group of people. There was a group, they called themselves the Pharisees. There was another group that called themselves the Sadducees. The commentator says the Herodians weren't really that sort of a thing, which is not to say that you couldn't identify Herodians. They would be the sort of people who would want Herod to have power. And they're standing on the Temple Mount. Now, who put the temple together lately in a way that it is very, very beautiful. In fact, at one point, Jesus is walking along and people are marveling at the temple. Who did that? Well, it was Herod. Herod the Great, who is a father to the Herod that we're dealing with in this part of Jesus' life. Okay, but Herod is the one who who puts this all together, and Herod ruled over a good territory, and he was called the king. He was called king. He was a subject king, right? He was a subject of the Romans. He ingratiated himself to Caesar, Octavius. And he continued to hold his family's authority. In fact, when he died, in his will, he said, "I want my kingdom to be divided up between these three sons." And it was done that way. So he's still within the favor of the Roman Empire in such a way that his kingdom is divided up in three pieces between three sons, which was according to his will, even though as soon as his will was read, everybody wrote to Rome and said, no, you can't do this because, no, you can't do this because, no. There were a bunch of people who wrote to Rome and said, no, you can't do this. And Rome said, he's our man, we're gonna let it go. And so they did. Now, that didn't work out quite as Herod had hoped, right? Whenever you divide up a kingdom between three sons, you end up with kind of a mishmash. You end up with less than what you started with. And in fact, one of his sons was impetuous and heavy-handed. And he was the first, the eldest of them, and he ended up with half of Herod's kingdom, which is the lower half that included Jerusalem. I have a map. Now, you guys out there aren't going to really see the map very well, but here it is, the whole area, and Herod's kingdom was up here. Here's the Sea of Galilee, here's the Dead Sea, and here's the Jordan River that runs between them, okay? And Herod's kingdom was here, and over here, okay? And then the one son, the oldest son who got half the kingdom, got all of this. It's in green, and maybe you can see that from where you are, right? It's in light green. And then the Herod that we know as Herod was Herod Antipas, the Herod at the time of Jesus' death. So that Herod got this part and this part, Galilee and Perea. So those are the parts where Herod Antipas ruled. And then Philip, another son, got this tetrarchy here. A tetrarchy is 1/4. Okay? So a tetrarch is somebody who got 1/4 of the kingdom. Minor player, right? Herod Antipas was also a minor player. Okay? In the sense that he was a tetrarch. This guy was called an ethnarch, which is bigger. And this all used to really confuse me, and in fact, it still does. And you know why it confused me? Because it's confusing. That Herod had 10 wives, 5 of whom are important. And then a lot of these other guys had wives, and this guy married this guy's wife, and that was John the Baptist, got him in trouble and all that sort of stuff. So that it's really, really involved, and it involves different Caesars as well. I'll put this down for you guys to take a closer look.
So what was that something? The one in the light green?
In the light green, his name was Archelaus. Archelaus. Yeah. And just so you know, so what happened was Herod the Great died around the year 4 BC. Scholars are sure when he died, except that some scholars are sure he died at a different time than other scholars seem to be sure of, right? And so there's some confusion in terms of some of these things. I think 4 is pretty clear to most, though. And Archelaus ruled for 9 years in this area. But because he was so heavy-handed and because he was unpredictable, he changed high priests quite frequently. The Jews never really liked Herod or any of the Herods, okay? And so because of that, he ruled for 9 years, and then he was deposed and exiled to France. You can see how that's a terrible exile if you don't like France. But so this then became a procuratorship or a governorship, right? And that's where we get down the road a fella named Pontius Pilate. That was the father of Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus. Yeah. So these are all from the Herod family, right? And so Herod the Great is the one who made that proclamation. Okay? So this bit of history, this is a Bible study and not a homily. And I know that I kind of try to put things in a nice bow and give you a nice homily kind of thing with this. But today, I was just so fascinated by some of these historical details, and this particular the different Herods and the intrigues and how they related with Rome. Right? Herod the Great was a friend of a Caesar. Herod, the son of down the line, the next one down, who rules after Pontius Pilate, he eventually is going to regain almost all of what Herod ruled over. Okay, so that's all going to eventually play out. But you don't need to know that right now because we don't run into him until we get to Acts. That's Herod Agrippa. But he is in the Bible, and he consolidates his power as well. Okay, so why is this important to us at this time? Because you see that this part is ruled by a Roman governor or procurator, right? This area is being ruled at the time that we're talking about by Pontius Pilate from 26 to 36 AD, the time of Jesus' death. So there is no Herod in control here. So what do the Herodians want? The Herodians want a Jewish king, right? They want somebody who is ethnically and preferably religiously connected to the Jewish people, but also is connected with Rome, which is why the Pharisees and the Herodians aren't usually allies. They don't usually go together, right? Because the Herodians are in league with Rome, and the Pharisees are saying, should we pay the temple tax? Because that might be a problem for us, religiously speaking, because we worship God on his temple, and he is sovereign, and therefore we should have a kingdom, not beholden to Rome. So the Herodians, you can see how they would like to extend the influence of Herod down to this part. So that's sort of their bent. They're not really a party, okay? They're not like the Pharisees or the Sadducees or the Essenes or some of the other groups that are, solid groups. But they're people who have a sentiment, at least according to that one scholar, right? Other scholars might say, nah, they're a party. But they are not so firm, and they are loose enough, but they capture the sentiment of what certain people would like to see happen for this region. And eventually it does, right? Because Herod Agrippa will eventually have this whole area he'll be the king of this whole, he'll even get the title king again. Well, he'll be called king again, okay? So you have these people who are allied in trying to get Jesus to be tripped up, but they're not really allies. They're using each other. Because the way that the question is posed, whichever way Jesus answers, right? And they give him an A or B question. Is it this or this? And if he answers this, then the Pharisees can be mad and they can say, you see, he's not worth following because he's not a real Jew. And if he answers the other way, then the Herodians can go to Pontius Pilate and say, you see, this man is a troublemaker. We need to get rid of him because he hates the Romans. And he's preaching it. And in the year 6, which is the year that, let's see, I think I wrote that down here somewhere. In the year 6 AD, which is the year that Archelaus was deposed, was exiled. In the year 6 AD, a fellow named Judas the Galilean started a revolt where he said to people, we shouldn't pay this tax. Exactly the question that they're asking, right? So they're setting him up for a trap that has already been sprung on other people. And of course, Jesus would know that, and everybody would know that. But Jesus sees through it in an even deeper way, okay? By the way, to make the trap all the more sweet, what do? They approach him and they say, Teacher, we know that you're a truthful man, meaning that he's true to his word. He's an honest person. You're an honest person. You're not going to lie to us, right? We know that you're a truthful person, that you teach the way of God, and that you are not influenced by status or opinion, right? You're not swayed by, the flowing and ebbing of opinions, and you don't look at, who's the richest person who says this. What do the rich people say, or what do the poor people say? And when you hear that, you can think about the judge. Remember the judge who thinks about neither the wealthy nor the poor? Jesus talks about him in one of his parables. That's biblical justice. Biblical justice looks at people and says, you're rich, you're poor, but your cases are equal, right? You don't have an edge because you're rich, and you don't have an edge because you're poor in court, because what the court is looking for is the truth. Is the truth. Okay? So they butter him up with this. Jesus, of course, sees right through them. If he would pay the Roman the tax, he would be a Roman sympathizer. And if he didn't pay it, he would be a revolutionary. Now, Jesus' response, he says, show me the coin. This is one part of the story that in reading up on it, it was great to see this. Because he says, show me the coin. So what do on the Temple Mount? They reach in their pockets and they pull out a Roman coin. The Pharisees, maybe the Herodians, I suppose maybe it was just the Herodians who had the Roman coin, except that was not the way it worked. Pharisees and Herodians alike, all of them were paying the tax at this point. And so they may have qualms about it, but they've all got the money in their pocket, right? So he says, show me a coin, and they pull out the coin, the evidence that shows that they're hypocrites, right? You're hypocrites because you're asking me a question that you don't, in the end, care what I answer. You are doing what you're saying not to do or what you're saying to do in any case. You have the coins in your pocket. And why is this important? Well, because that coin, the denarius, remember, I've been talking about how that's a day's wage, right? Which means that everybody was using it. They weren't talking about being paid with shekels. They were talking about being paid with a Roman silver coin called a denarius. And the denarius, in particular the one that was minted at the time of Jesus, would have had on one side the picture of the Caesar, the ruler, who is Tiberius Caesar. And it says, Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. Okay, so it's calling the last Caesar a god. They're bringing a coin that calls the last Caesar a god, and Tiberius eschewed that. He said, no, don't call me divine. So what does it say on the back of the coin? It says, the great high priest. In other words, he's not calling himself divine, but he's not refraining from calling his dad a king or a god, right? He is using a coin and connecting it with worship. Do you see why the Pharisees have a problem with this, right? It's not just a coin, but they could legitimately say, is using this coin an act of idolatry? Is this an act of worship? It's a legitimate question, but they're not asking it legitimately because they're asking it so that they can trap Jesus. And Jesus' answer is beautiful. You heard it just a second ago. Well, it's Tiberius on there. So give the coin to the one it belongs to. It's his face on there. Give him the coin. And give to God what belongs to God. So here's where it gets all religious on us. What bears the image of God? Well, we know from Genesis. In his image and likeness he made them. Male and female he created them. Genesis chapter 1. So we are made in the image and likeness of God. And everybody knows Genesis. Everybody knows Genesis chapter 1, especially in those days, right? But now, even now, people know that. So, that's where my notes end. What else? There was something. And I think I'm going to stop there. I'll lay out the book if you want to read it along with the map. But there's an incomplete commentary for the Gospel of Matthew that St. Thomas Aquinas. It was written in the 5th century. Thomas Aquinas would have lived much later than that, hundreds of years later than that, right? But Thomas Aquinas admired it. This incomplete commentary on the Gospel of Matthew. It's unknown who wrote it. For a while it was attributed to St. John Chrysostom, so you can hear why I might think it's a great thing. And there's a passage from this where it talks about the coin of Caesar and the coin of God. The image of Caesar and the image of God and what it means to live that out. The reason I don't want to read it to you is because I've talked too long, but also because I think it's a little hard to listen to. It really bears sort of looking at. And what he does is he talks about the things that if someone has the image of God, then they're not going to do these things, and they are going to do these things. And so I think it's really good. St. Thomas Aquinas, just to talk again about that incomplete commentary, St. Thomas Aquinas, as he's riding up to Paris, somebody points Paris out to him and says, "Isn't it beautiful?" And Aquinas' response is, "They could make me the mayor of Paris, and it still wouldn't be as valuable to me as if I had the rest of the incomplete commentary on the Gospel of Matthew." So he liked it a lot, and I think you might like this passage a little bit as well. So God bless you. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you,